I was still in high school when the Brony fandom actually started. The show aired in October 2010, and despite the explosion of popularity that the show got, I actually didn't really know anything about it. I didn't even know that it existed. I was still putting up with a bunch of crap at the schools, and after that, I had to leave for that life center. And a noticeable thing about that place is that one of the students was actually wearing a pony t shirt. And I even remembered that they got a pony cake on their birthday. And I think that was one of the earlier signs that this was actually becoming a really big thing. Like, at least for me. I was kind of busy doing other stuff, and I was actually interested in other things, so I didn't feel very motivated to look into this Brony fandom thing. The closest that I got to watching the show at the time was randomly coming across it on YouTube. Like, I'd see a clip of the show here, I'd see a clip of the show there, and as I saw it, I was kind of thinking to myself, wow, this admittedly looks a little bit different from what MLP is usually associated with. The Flash animation seemed unique. It did come across as basic Flash animation, but the movements started to become very energized and they seemed to flow very smoothly. There weren't too many awkward poses that I could think of from the top of my head, and it actually had a kind of original design. The models of the characters were very different from previous MLP generations, and yeah, they're all basically the same design with different fur colors and different hairstyles, but I think it was because they used so many different combinations with the body styles and the colors and the hair designs that it helped each of the figures to stand out better. Even then, however, I didn't really bring myself to actually try to get into the show or actually start watching it. Despite that I might have heard of the fandom at some point, I don't know, I guess it was because I had very little awareness of the fandom and the show at this time that I can't really remember when my first actual introduction to its presence was. And then, it happened. In April 2013, fairly early in the month, it was a Friday and I had just gotten home with pizza. And I was thinking to myself, what could I watch while I eat? And I figured that I didn't really have any other idea for what I would watch while I was eating. So I knew that there was some MLP episodes on the internet, and they were actually viewable on YouTube before the whole copyright purge thing. So I looked up the very first episode, and I started watching it while I was eating, and as the episode progressed, I was really getting into it. I was starting to obtain a new appreciation for the animation. It was steady, and it also had a lot of fast speed and movement. The movements looked very natural, and they never appeared to be stilted, despite that it was being done with Flash. When the characters are walking, it looks like they're walking. When the characters are running, it looks like they're running. So forth and so forth and so forth. What I was really starting to like, though, were the characters. There was just so much lovable charm and wide-eyed innocence to them, and none of their personalities came across as one note. I wanted to see what was going to happen in the rest of the episode, and I just couldn't stop watching it. After that, I just immediately went on to the next episode, and I just couldn't stop watching it. I just got so immersed into it. The story was simple, but it was well paced and it was written very nicely. There was surprisingly a lot of variety with the animation. It was colorful, the backgrounds were very pleasant, and a lot of the special effects were very on par with the style of the animation that was chosen. I just couldn't put the series down, and I was still going to have dreams when this was happening, so I was watching episodes of the show throughout the scheduled and timed events that I was set for on that day. They had some iPads which I used to connect to the internet while I was doing exercise and doing some paperwork and eating my lunch. I just kept on going from episode to episode to episode to episode, and I just couldn't stop. I just really liked the show so much that I wanted to see where it was going. And by the time I was finished with season 3, I just felt like it was such a really good trip. It felt kind of brief seeing as how I pretty much marathoned the entire show at the time, which was about 65 episodes. There were a couple of times that I came across an episode that I didn't like, but the ones that I liked, I really liked. The first times that I watched Winter Wrap-Up or A Friend Indeed or A Canterlot Wedding, Sisterhoof Social, Lesson Zero, Return of Harmony, Dragon Shy, Sonic Rainboom, Party of One, The Cutie Mark Chronicles, Family Appreciation Day, Dragon Shy, Wonderbolt Academy, A Canterlot Wedding, even Spike at Your Service, which I didn't even think was that bad, even compared to everybody else who was talking about how it was one of the worst episodes of the season. And when I finally got to Magical Mystery Cure, I wasn't too knowledgeable about the Twilight turned into an alicorn drama at the time. I just felt like it was so deserved, and if this was actually the series finale, I would have been completely okay with it. Twilight passed her friendship test that was given to her by Celestia, and she ascended to her new level in studies. Of course I knew this couldn't be the series finale, because there were a couple of things that they didn't really touch upon yet, such as the CMC getting their cutie marks, or Rainbow Dash becoming a member of the Wonderbolts, or Spike getting some clarification on his relationship with Rarity. I was really interested in seeing what the show was going to do next, and that's when Equestria Girls was announced. That's something I'm gonna have to talk about another time because I think it would be inappropriate to drag out the length of this video by talking about what I thought about that movie, especially when I said that I would review it in the future anyway. So, after I finished watching Season 3 and the hiatus for Season 4 had started, I was thinking to myself, I just became too invested into the show to just take a break from it. So I was thinking to myself, what could I do until Season 4 starts? That's when I started to explore the Brony fandom. And as I looked into it more, I was completely blown away by how big it was. Like, the popularity explosion of this show was unbelievable. Like, it was so big that an entire convention was invented in its name. And not just a convention, there were a whole bunch of conventions for people who celebrate the show. Seeing so many people come together like this, united in their interest in the show, and even getting to learn more about them through personal backstories and stuff like that. I've heard about how the show helped people find friends and how it helped them through times of depression, how it was helping them find work, and how it was giving them opportunities to become famous by doing YouTube content on the show. I haven't seen a popularity explosion like this since Pokemon. Like, there were people of all ages from both genders who were just so enchanted by the show, and it was really nice seeing them being brought together like this. And the content that they were creating was also just really interesting content, and it showed how much inspiration that people were taking from the show. There were people making original songs and music based on their interest in the series. I remember listening to music and songs from the fandom all the time when I ever came across one that I really, really liked. Then there was fan artwork and comics, and they all ranged through different types of emotions. They focused on comedy, emotional topics, drama, sad stuff, uplifting stuff, even some clever satire on the show. And then there were those art pieces that just came across as really, really addictive eye candy. Like, you could look at these paintings and drawings all day. There were so many different styles from so many different artists that it was hard to not look through every single one. You just wanted to see how many variations of pony artwork there were. There was 3D models, there was 2D traditional animation, detailed paintwork and shadowing effects, and of course there was some stuff that I just thought was really cute. I think the saddest thing that I ever saw was I'm Sorry I Couldn't Be There For You, which is a fan comic about Fluttershy's relationship with Scootaloo. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it yet, but it makes me cry every single time. I tear up like a little kid every single time I see it, especially the dramatic reading of it. It was obviously something that was never meant to be canon, but the thought that someone was putting so much heart into something that could be dark but also very uplifting in the end, it was actually a very touching read. God, there's just so much to talk about that I just can't possibly cover it in this one video and have enough time to talk about anything else. There were people making pony videos, which is just a bunch of people making animations of the characters from the show, putting them in all sorts of silly situations, whether it was done with Flash or traditional animation or 3D models. They were all very pleasant to look at because they had a very good grasp of an understanding of the show as well as its lore that's been established alongside the personalities of the characters. And even when they made characters up, they still told very good stories with them. There were people in the fandom who told stories from all sorts of different angles, including fanfiction, which was surprisingly pretty big. I mean, normally you wouldn't expect fan fictions to have a big name for themselves, but then you got things like Fallout Equestria and My Little Dashie and Past Sins. Admittedly, I never really had much of an interest in fan fiction, but I understood that a lot of popularity was surrounding these fan stories, so I just wanted to, just leave it be and not bother anyone who got into it. And on top of all that, there were even charities that were done by people in the Brony fandom. I remember this charity run that was done for a kid who was bullied by other students because of his interest in the show that led him to hurting himself, and there was a bunch of charity that was done to help him get back on his feet, and a lot of shout-out videos wishing that he would get well soon, all sorts of really good stuff like that. There was also another charity for this girl who, is unfortunately not of this world anymore. She, passed on. Her name was Kiki Havivi, and she was only 6 years old, which I didn't think was right. I mean, she should be playing with her grandmother, going to school to learn things about life, spending time with her family, and the fact that she just went so soon, it just really got to me how sad it was and how bittersweet the memorial was. Even Tara Strong noticed what was going on, and she revealed that the fandom had made a pony OC of her. An earth pony with creamy light yellow fur, red freckles, brownish red hair, a cutie mark that was a yellow flower with pink petals, bright blue eyes, and a very youthful design. It was just a very great thing for them to do. And there was even a tagline for her departure that was along the lines of, "She needed to go. Heaven needed more smiles." That was just really touching, and it just really got to me. This was a fandom unlike any that I had ever seen before or had any knowledge of. Like, with previous fandoms, I just knew that it was a bunch of nerds who really, really liked something, but There was something about the Brony fandom that made it unique and really stand out. There were people who were really taking inspiration from the original source material to create great things like stories and music and fan animations, and atop of all that, there were also these donations that helped people in need and get them a better life for themselves. And on top of all that, they commemorated the early passing, the untimely passing of one of their youngest members by creating an OC capturing her personality and the life that she lived, even if it was very short. There was just something so great about this fandom that I just became attached to it as much as I became attached to the show. And after everything that happened with my family and school, I just felt like someday I could do something that this fandom would recognize me for. Something that would make me feel like I belong in this fandom. Here I can be my own person, I can make friends, I could do whatever I want with them, and no one would discriminate against me for any reason whatsoever. I just loved it so much. Unfortunately, there was also this dark side of the internet that invented an entire subculture that was made purely to hate on people who were fans of the show. I am, of course, talking about anti-bronies. Nowadays, I don't really pay attention to much of it, and sometimes I just kind of try to have fun with these people coming across as trolls. But at first, when I first really got into the show and the fandom, I was extremely defensive of any discrimination against the fandom. Like, there were people who were just calling us freaks and people who should be killed or stuff like that. They don't deserve any kind of happiness, or they're just completely outcasted by these assholes, and I didn't think that was right. It was coming across as an irrational hate that shouldn't exist, just like homophobia or racism. I would get into all sorts of fights with these nutjobs, and they were coming up with all sorts of desperate ways to get rid of us. They even made a petition to ban all bronies from the United States, calling us gay. And the real kicker about this is that 4 people actually signed it. It's just so stupid. It is the most unintelligent thing that I have ever seen in the history of my exploration on the internet. Now, really think about how long the internet has been around and all the stupid shit we've seen on it. They're basically treating us like some kind of terrorist, and the world would automatically become a better place if we just disappeared. Yeah, like, getting rid of fandom for a cartoon show is going to fix anything. I mean, yeah, those were some pretty dumb times during my early days of interest in the fandom and the show, but it's been years later, and I've kind of just moved on from arguing with those idiots. Like, there's a lot of better things that I could do with my time instead of constantly looking for anti-bronies to rebel against just out of spirit. And I really don't want to go looking for trouble that I don't need. Which brings me to the last thing that I started to notice as I started to look into the fandom more, which was the Brony analysis community. Now, I don't remember the very, very, very first video I ever saw from any member of the analysis community, but I quickly found out that there was a whole bunch of them. People who had made a name for themselves by becoming critics and reviewers for the show. And even if I don't exactly remember who I started with, I do remember what it was like when I first started watching each of these characters and really got interested in their content. I remember seeing Mr. Enter's countdowns on his best and worst episodes of MLP, though I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people agreed with his worst decisions. I remember Josh Scorcher when he was primarily a gamer before he slowly became a brony progressively, and he eventually opened a second channel where he started doing Season 4 reviews. I remember when Buck Brony did a collab with I Love Kim Possible a Lot for a review of Over a Barrel, which was actually amongst the first collabs for an episode review that I saw. I remember watching Voice of Reason's battles against Buck Reviewer and ANY Entertainment when he was trying to disapprove their claims that Dragon Quest and Bridal Gossip were good episodes when he pointed out all the flaws in each episode. There was just something about his cynicism that I kind of liked. And even if he wasn't entirely optimistic about the episodes, it still was a lot of fun seeing him work off another reviewer, and I eventually just fell into his content a little bit more. I remember seeing Lily Pete's parody of A Canterlot Wedding in I don't know how many minutes, when she made a joke about how terrible the ending song was. I guess she's not a fan of pop songs. I remember Dr. Wolf's topic on how Pinkie Pie could actually be becoming more mature, and I really got immersed into his calm nature. I looked into his content, and I saw that he did some kind of A Moment with Dr. Wolf side series where he would communicate with other reviewers of the show or people who are involved in the Brony fandom in some way. It was just really nice seeing him talk to others about their problems and helping them advance to become better people by overcoming those problems. I remember seeing Tommy Oliver's collab with Anthony C. on A Canterlot Wedding back when I wasn't thinking about how I could be a dick to him. It was actually a very entertaining collab. It mixed a great sense of humor with very intriguing thoughts and analysis and a few possible headcanons. It kind of makes me want to go back and see some of his older material before the fallout with seasons 4 and 5. I remember Theory Brony when he was in a little bit of a rut, and I don't know if his situation has improved, but I do know that he had to eventually move on from the Brony fandom. And I was kind of wondering what was happening with the activity on his channel, because when I first came across his channel, I noticed that it wasn't entirely active, and I noticed that he uploaded a video explaining his situation, and his thank you video that was acknowledging Tommy Oliver, ANY, and a few others for helping him get the success that he got as an MLP reviewer. There were a whole bunch of other reviewers that I was aware of, such as Golden Fox, Autistic Pony, Canned Cream, Sweetie Bloom, Robin, whatever the 4 digits of his name is. I wouldn't have watched their material until later down the road. And the thing about the analysis community was, it wasn't just people who reviewed the show, it was a subculture within the Brony fandom that was helping people understand what made the show so special and why people like it. Because, in my mind, for a while now, I think that's what analysis has always been in the Brony community, helping others understand why people like the show, and how it ended up getting the fandom that it has. I just couldn't get enough of their reviews of the show. I would just see them all the time, and I wanted to look back to some of their earlier MLP content to see what they thought of earlier MLP material, or if they have any unique headcanons of their own. I'm not exactly sure what word that I could use to describe it. I just really liked seeing these people talk about the show and bringing some new ideas about its universe to the table. It actually wasn't until season 4 started that things really started to kick in for the analysis community. I mean, season 4 was the golden age of MLP analysis. Like, no matter what you think of season 4, this was the season that the analysts were the most active. Everyone was making a review of the episode on a perfect schedule. Everyone was discussing the episodes in podcasts. Everyone was doing collabs for what they thought of the episode. Everyone was expressing their feelings towards the show's new direction, for better or worse. And everyone was gaining attention for their thoughts on the show. This was even the season in which we got some newcomers to the table, such as Silverquill and Brony Buck, Sweetie Bloom, Red Cord, Canned Cream, Toon Critic Y2K, T-Bab, Jesse Wood, who was drowning in horseshoes, Gibbon Take. It was by far the best season for people who were known for reviewing the show. And there was something about it that made me want to be a part of it. So, on my old YouTube channel, I decided to try something called Season 4 Mania, but it was already halfway through the season. I didn't really start until March 5th of 2014, which was on my birthday. I guess I just wanted to time it very well. And, of course, I did my own reviews of the show, or at least episodes of Season 4. And at the time, I didn't have a good microphone, so I was using the automated one in my webcam. That went about as well as you'd expect. And when I really looked back to them, they were really, really horrible videos. Like, there was a lot of awkward pacing and pausing issues and editing and not very good audio. And I kind of forgot to include credits at the end of each episode. I'm actually kind of surprised that none of them got pulled for copyright infringement. Of course, this wasn't at the time when it was at its worst. But eventually, I just felt like I wanted to start all over. And so I just got rid of all those reviews because they weren't very good quality anyway. And I was kind of seeking advice on how I could gain recognition for doing this, because I felt like this was something that I wanted to do as a hobby, but I also wanted people to know that I was doing this. I wanted to, I don't know, just make a name for myself by being a person who talked about ponies. So, at Anime Midwest that same year, I learned that Toon Critic Y2K was hosting a panel alongside Eliora, and they were known analysts in the community. I went to the panel, and I actually recorded almost the entire thing on my phone, and I think I still have it on my phone, the recording from that day. It's almost 2 years old now. TK and Ellie were the very first members of the analysis community that I actually communicated with, and I just felt really special getting a chance to talk to these celebrities that I looked up to. They never would have guessed that this random guy who wanted to ask about what they thought of Pinkie Pie throughout Season 4 would turn out to be the jerk-ass who tried to stir up a whole bunch of drama in a year's time. Oh, boy, how time flies. Yeah, time really does fly. It only feels like yesterday that I first started watching the show, when I learned about the analysis community and all of this great stuff that was going on with the artwork and the music and the fan fictions and stories and videos. And later down the line, I started to see some darker parts of the fandom. And it really wasn't pretty. I guess it was because I didn't start watching the show until after Season 3 ended that I wasn't too fully aware of all the drama surrounding Twilight turning into an alicorn, or how Indians were represented in Over a Barrel. But for me, the drama really began during some point in Season 4, when people were accusing Pinkie Pie Pinkamena Diane of Flanderization. And from there, it just felt like the world that I thought I knew, the Brony fandom, it all just came crashing down.